Welcome to Christ Church Online. We're so happy that you could join us. If you're ever in the tri-state area, we would love to have you worship with us live at either of our 2 locations. Whether you choose to attend our beautiful cathedral in the heart of Montclair or our scenic 107-acre campus in Rockaway Township, we promise to make you feel right at home. We broadcast every Sunday, so make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on social media at Christ Church USA. You can also check out our website at christchurchusa.org for more information on our mission of connecting people to God and people to people. Now it's time for worship.
Let's worship the Lord. Let's celebrate him today. When night has fallen, when fear is coming, still you're calling me. When faith is lost and my hope exhausted, you will be my strength. When my mind says I'm not good enough, God, you're enough for me. Yeah, I've decided I'm not giving up. You won't give up on me. You won't give up on me. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. No, I feel it breaking out like an echo, echo in my soul. Yeah. In every season, you keep repeating promises to me. Now there's no stopping what you have started until it is complete. When my mind says I'm not good enough, God, you're enough for me. Yeah, I decided I'm not giving up. You won't give up on me. Say, your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out, an echo in my soul. Hey. Echo in my soul. Oh. When my mind says I'm not good enough, God, you're enough for me. I've decided I'm not giving up. You won't give up on me. Yeah. Your love is holding on. Come on, let's sing it out. Like an echo, love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out, breaking out. Everybody say, your love is holding on. I feel it breaking out like an echo, yeah. And it won't let go. I feel it breaking out, an echo in my, yeah, an echo in my soul. Oh, come on, let's give a shout to Jesus. Thank you, God, for your love that always covers us. We thank you that it pursues us and that it's fierce towards us. We love you, God. Oh, Jesus. Before I call, answer me from where the thunder hides. I can't outrun this heart I'm tethered to. With every step, I collide with you. Let's declare. Like a tidal wave, crushing over me, rushing in to meet me here. Your love is fierce, like a hurricane that I can't escape, tearing through the atmosphere. Your love, you cannot fail. The only thing I found is through it all, you never let me down. You don't hold back, relentless in pursuit. At every turn, I come face to face with you. Like a tidal wave, crushing over me, rushing in to meet me here. Your love, like a hurricane that I can't escape, tearing through the atmosphere. Like a tidal wave, crashing over me, it's rushing. Yeah, your love is fierce, yeah, that I can't escape. Oh, His love is fierce. Aren't you thankful? His love is for you. Let's declare. You chase me down, you seek me out. How could I be lost when you have called me found? Yeah, you chase me down, you seek me out. Thank you, God. Let's lift it up this morning. You chase me down, you seek me out, yes you do. How could I be lost when you have called me found? You chase me down, you seek me out. How could I? Oh, like a tidal wave, crashing over me, rushing in to meet me here. Your love is fierce, like a hurricane. It's tearing through the atmosphere. Like a tidal wave, it's crashing over me. It's rushing this morning. Yeah. Like a hurricane that I can't escape. You chase me down, you seek me out. How could I be lost when you have called me found? Let's proclaim that. You chase me down, yeah. How could I? Oh, you chase me down, you seek me out. How could I? One more time, you chase me down, you seek me out. How could I?
You're watching Christ Church Online, and we're excited to have you here. We'll get back to our Sunday service in just a bit, but first, we want you to know that it's your generosity that allows us to serve people in the tri-state area and the world with love-fueled ministries such as this online service. With that being said, would you get a gift together that demonstrates your appreciation for this broadcast? If you're moved to leave an offering, simply text the word GIVE plus the amount to the number below, or by hitting the Give tab at the top corner of our website. For your gift of any size, we want to give you a sermon access card of the series, The Office.
When we walk into the office as a Christ follower, let's exude the fact that not only we're coming to the workplace, God is coming with us to the workplace. And we're going to be the most productive. We're going to be the most exemplary work ethic. We're going to work like we own the place. We're going to work like an employer. I want us to be able to model these kinds of traits. Imagine when you go to work this week, if your attitude takes that shift, if your demeanor takes that shift, if your perspective takes that shift, you would see yourself poised and positioned to be able to get promotion, to get advancement. And if that company doesn't advance you, your good name will have such a far-reaching reputation, others would want you in their company. Others would want you a part of their business.
In this 4-part series, Pastor David and the preaching team unpack biblical principles to help us understand God's view about work and God's vision for what work should mean in our lives. Thank you for your continued support of the ministry of Christ Church. And now, back to our message.
I want to talk with you about a topic I titled Expect to Reap. For the past 4 weeks, I've been teaching on the law of sowing and reaping. And we've learned together that our thoughts, our words, our actions, our investment of time, and even our giving of money are all seeds that we sow. And when we sow, we ought to expect to reap. I teach on lots of topics over the course of the year, from parenting. Why? I want you to become a stronger, better, more effective parent. On marriage. Why? So you can have a healthier marriage. I teach on prayer so you can have a strong, powerful prayer life. I teach on money management, saving, debt reduction. Why? So you can know how to handle money. And so, as I teach on sowing and reaping today, this is a special day in the life of our church. It's the end of the series, but it's also a day that we've set apart to say we're going to sow a generous gift, financial gift, into the work of the Lord so we can reap a generous receipt of resources from God for our families. How many would love to see your family move to another level in resources? So would I. My words and thoughts will be brought out of 1 Kings chapter 17. Join me there. As you're locating it, and I'll also have those verses on the screen in a moment, I want to walk you through a principle so we can start off 1 Kings 17 with this premise. Here's the principle. Throughout the entirety of the Bible, God tells us that after you plant, you can expect to reap. Genesis 8:22 says, as long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. Do you see the cycle? Do you see the principle? Do you see when you sow, you reap? Winter, summer, day, night. God says that cycle will always continue. Therefore, it can be expected to reap when you sow. Job chapter 4 verse 8 puts it this way. As I have observed, those who plow evil and those who sow trouble reap it. So Job is saying, I've seen people when they do bad things happen to them. Jesus then chimes in, but he focuses on money when he deals with sowing and reaping. He says in Luke 6:38, give and you'll receive a large quantity, pressed together, shaken down, and running over will be put into your pocket. The standards you use for others will be applied to you. Jesus is saying, even when it comes to the arena of money, the principle of sowing and reaping works. Paul says, I got to get involved in the conversation. He does in Galatians 6:7. Paul says, do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. That's pretty heavy. In other words, the scripture teaches us from Genesis all the way to the book of Revelation, you can expect to reap when you sow. No matter who you are, no matter where you are, you can expect it. It was about 20 years ago. Our church, there was no West Campus, just East Campus at the time. Just moved into the East Campus. And God began to stir the heart of our pastoral team about going on radio and using the Sunday morning teaching as the radio teaching program. And so the major station at that time, there was no internet, that's not the big deal. Radio was the big deal at that time. The major radio station in this New York metropolitan area was WMCA, 570 AM. We called them up. And I said, we'd love to get a daily spot, Monday through Friday. What do you have? He said, Reverend Ireland, I'm sorry, but it's all taken. We have nothing. I said, whoa. Hung up. And I was going to a conference that week in Pittsburgh. During the conference time, as I'm sitting in my seat, the offertory time came, and the minister receiving the offering said, is there an area in your life where the doors are closed, tight, shut, but you want to see God break it open? Why not sow a seed? A seed is a prophetic plow that breaks up things that are hardened and releases a harvest. Some things that some people say, you write it down and say, whoa, that makes a whole lot of sense. It ties right into the Bible. Never heard it like that before. Sometimes you write it down. Sometimes it's written on you. When he said that, it was written right on me. Each day's program would cost $500. I pulled out my checkbook. I said, I'm going to write a $500 seed to say, God, would you, with this seed, open a daily talk program? I kid you not. Put that offering in the offering basket. I got back home, got a call that Monday or Tuesday. Reverend Ireland, a program, drive time, 9 a.m., Monday to Friday. The person that was holding the program wants to end the contract. Would you be interested in taking that slot? Oh, you better believe it. Took that slot. Was on radio for about 10 years in about 10 different markets in America. And we would have radio rallies. A radio rally that we host sometimes in New York is when we gather people who are listening to the radio, listening to my program. I don't know who they are because radio is just it's just one-way communication. And so we'd gather, we'd have a worship time, then I would teach, and I would autograph some of my books. And as I remember after teaching, I'm sitting at a table in the altar area, right at the front, and I'm autographing books, and this big burly guy comes up to me and says, Dr. Ireland, I'm a police officer here in New York City, and I was driving my squad car one day, flipped the radio station, got a hold of your program. I gave my heart to Jesus in that squad car. I just wanted to see you face to face and thank you. Come on, we can give the Lord a round of applause. I'm just telling you. This seed creates harvest. I had no idea that type of harvest was going on because radio is just one-way communication. Now we're at this place where I want to set you up to show you, set you up in a sense of teaching of the Bible to show you how you ought to expect to reap whenever you sow. Before I start reading verse 7, I want you to know the story, the setting is the nation of Israel. A famine had been going on for at least 2 years at this time. The prophet Elijah prophesied, there shall be no rain in this nation until I prophesy otherwise. God had told him to prophesy that. God shut up the heavens. Famine hit the nation. The king and queen put a hit out on Elijah, and then God told him, go and hide by the brook, by the Kerith ravine. There you'll get water. In other words, nobody knows you're there. And I'm going to cause ravens to come and visit you in the morning and in the evening. They're going to drop off food. Elijah did that for 2 years. At the end of 2 years, the brook dried up. And what we're going to learn is this: beliefs drives behavior. What you believe is going to drive your behavior. So you got to check what you believe. Verse 7 says, sometime later the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to him, that is to Elijah, go at once to Zarephath in the region of Sidon and stay there. I've directed a widow there to supply you with food. So he went to Zarephath. When he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink? As she was going to get it, he called, and bring me, please, a piece of bread. As surely as the Lord your God lives, she replied, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I'm gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. Elijah said to her, don't be afraid. Go home and do as you've said. But first, make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me. And then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. She went away and did as Elijah told her. So there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family. For the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. Every time I read the Bible and read stories like this, God, I love how you move. But then when I'm going through crisis, I say, God, I hope you move. I mean, it's just, we see this big gulf between what God did in the scriptures and where we are. And somehow we divorce ourselves from the God of the Bible, thinking that those Bible characters are special. They're different than us. These people, they're so holy. God really loves them. Me? But that's not true. They're ordinary people like us. I want you to realize how Elijah's belief drove his behavior. He'd been walking with God long enough to know that, hey, I'm right by the brook. The bed of the brook, it's dry. The ground is cracked. It's parched. Not a drop of water. If I don't get water, I'm going to die of thirst. God speaks to him. Elijah, I want you to get up and go to Zarephath, because I have commanded a widow woman there, to feed you. Watch Elijah's belief. He never questioned God. Why Zarephath? Zarephath was Gentile territory. Why a Gentile widow? Why not a guy? I feel bad. I'm a guy going to a woman, a widow woman at that, a Gentile widow woman at that, to ask for food. God, why Zarephath? 8 miles south of where I am. Why Zarephath? He never argued with God. He never questioned God. He never debated with God. Why? How will I know her? How will she know that when I come to her and ask her for bread, that I'm really someone who she can give food to and help to sustain until the famine ends? And he never went through any of those things. Do you know why? Because those questions were above his pay grade. we grapple with them because, truth be told, we're too fleshly. We rely too much on our intellect. And we forget about the fact that we're spiritual beings that are housed in a body. God, He knows what's best. And when one brook dries up, He has another way to sustain you. And Elijah took God's word at face value. And so my question to you is that, is your behavior driven by your beliefs? And even when it comes to money, can you believe that God will cause you to reap when you sow? Or do you say, I got to see how I'm going to reap before I sow, and I have to see whom I'll be reaping through when I sow, and when I'll reap if I sow? I need all those questions answered first. If that's you, then you've fallen into a trap. And Elijah, he knew enough about God and about money to avoid the trap. There's a trap. And particularly for those who walk with Jesus, there is a theological trap. And the trap, there are two extremes to this trap. On one extreme, it's the poverty gospel, and the other extreme, it's the prosperity gospel. And so, as I look at this contrast, I want you to see that both those things, the reason why it's a trap, because you can find Bible verses to support both those theological viewpoints. The only problem is the interpretation of the Bible verses is flawed. That's what makes it a trap. It's like grace. Wonderful Bible theme and Bible principle. The grace of God, God's empowering presence that enables me to be what God's called me to be and to do what God's called me to do. But there's some people that fall into a trap of grace. You say, how could you do that? Error by emphasis. I know some guys, they say, well, God's grace is, it just, God forgives, God just is so kind. And so now they're on their 6th marriage because they've ruined every relationship because they say God's grace. Trap. So I want you to see that there's the prosperity gospel trap and the poverty gospel trap. Don't fall into either of them. The prosperity gospel trap says you're entitled to much. I'm a child of the King. I'm a son of God. I'm a daughter of the Most High God. The earth is mine and the fullness thereof. Everything that's good belongs to me. A little bit flawed. The poverty gospel trap says I'm entitled to little. I'm nobody. I'm poor and undeserving. I'm nobody significant, so I shouldn't seek anything of significance. Trap. Both are flawed. The prosperity gospel fosters lack of discipline. No budgeting, no living within your means. Just God will just meet all my needs, no matter how reckless I am. Trap. The poverty gospel, you lack destiny. You reason, I'm a victim of circumstances. My birth, my parents didn't understand money. I was born in poverty. I'm going to grow up in poverty. Nothing will change. The future is as is. I'm stuck. Trap. Not true. The prosperity gospel fosters wrong priorities. I just want more. Money cometh. Wrong theological perspective. Wrong assumptions about the nature of God. Wrong interpretation of the Bible. And it never thinks about the Great Commission. Never think about social justice. Never concerned about reaching out to the poor and lifting up people. Why? Because the prosperity gospel has wrong priorities. The poverty gospel, it has wrong perspective. You reason that God's not concerned about my earthly needs. God only concerns himself about spiritual things. We start espousing the view poverty is next to godliness. Not in the Bible. All those views give us a wrong view of God. God is not like that. The poverty gospel or the prosperity gospel neither give us accurate views of God. The prosperity gospel fosters a thinking that fuels greed. I just want more. Give me more stuff, bigger car, bigger house, more. I need 5 different fur coats. I just need more. How much more do you need? A little bit more. The poverty gospel fuels grief. You inadvertently grow feeling sorry for yourself. It isolates you from the magnificence and the goodness of God. You may ask, where then should I camp out theologically? Right in the middle. Where you say, it doesn't matter if I have much or little, I still serve God. Whatever circumstance I'm in, I still trust God to bring me up. It's called a social uplift of the gospel. Where God finds me, He doesn't keep me. He lifts me up. And He causes me to have a countenance and an outward view of a God that is good, a God that is magnificent, a God that loves, a God that cares, a God that meets need. Money is not evil. Rich is not evil. Rich people are not enemies of the cross. Poor people are not friends of God. Both can be enemies of the cross, and both can be friends of God. And so in the middle is where I want to be, where I say, God, I believe in the principle of sowing and reaping. It's a principle that says, God, I'm going to sow with my thoughts. I'm going to sow with my actions. I'm going to sow with my resources. And I'm going to reap good thoughts. I'm going to reap good actions. And I'm going to reap resources. Why do I believe that? Because the Word teaches it. But I'm not going to run over here where it's all about money consuming me. And I'm not going to run over here where it's all about emptiness and barrenness consuming me. Both are flawed. Both are antithetical to God. And I will not camp out in either end because they're extremes and they're not biblically accurate. I'm going to camp out where Jesus camps out. He says you serve the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, all your mind, all your strength. That God owns your heart and not money having your heart. I camp out with Jesus. That's where I want to be. And so I want you to see that Elijah picked himself up from the riverbank, the stream that has now run dry. And he took his feet, started walking 8 miles south from Sidon to Zarephath. When he gets to the city gate, he sees a woman gathering sticks. She's a distance away from him. He says, can you give me some water, just a little bit of water? She's saying, sure. She's walking to get some water. He says, by the way, can you bring me a little piece of bread? No. I mean, I got water, but I only have enough flour and some oil to make some bread for me and my son. And then after we eat, that's it. We're going to die. Elijah helps this woman who is gripped by fear to recognize this. Faith defeats fear. And there's some of you this morning, you're gripped by fear. And you say, oh, I'm not. Oh, yes, you are. Fear paralyzes you into faulty thinking. You really begin to believe that I don't need to sow to reap. I'm not sowing. Okay, that's your prerogative. You can choose what you want to do. But fear makes you unable to see any other outcome other than failure, death, or loss. Fear puts you in a vice grip. And so it starts to make you feel more and more like a victim, like a loser, like a failure. It's interesting, though, this unnamed woman who was a widow. We have no idea how long she had been a widow. We do know some facts about her. She has a son. And the Hebrew definition for that word, English word son, it's an underaged child. And that's very telling. The Bible never gives us information that doesn't lead us to more information. The reason why it says that she has a son, underage son, because in a male-based society, her underage son, he can't work, she has no husband, you don't see a father or a brother or an uncle or any other man attached to her. Widows were part of the base sort of poverty, the poverty line, the socioeconomic level. And a woman, she didn't have the same latitude for jobs and access to jobs as men did in the male-based society of Israel. And so widows were often prone to just receive charity. People felt sorry for them. And here she was at Zarephath. And Zarephath, by the way, it means the place of refinement. And many times God makes us go to Zarephath because he wants to refine us. And so he told Elijah, go to Zarephath. I want to refine you. And here's Elijah going to Zarephath, and he gets to the edge of the city. So this city of Zarephath was located on this public road. So he's on the road, and he gets there, and it's Zarephath. Who does he see? He sees this woman, and she's picking up sticks. And the word sticks there means twigs, more specifically, small little bramble. And so she's collecting twigs, because in the city center, all the people already exhausted all the sticks and the logs. And so she's now at the edge of the city gate. She's picking up twigs so she can carry a bundle home and make a fire so she can make bread. And then here comes this man. And I know that Elijah must have felt bad. How do you feel as a man? You're able-bodied, you're healthy, and you got to go and find a widow woman to sustain you. Poor woman. A Gentile widow woman in Gentile territory. Do you know how that must be humbling? Same thing happened to me. I got out of school, couldn't find a job in my field. I had to leave the dorms. The Stevens Institute of Technology said, look, graduation in May, you got to go. I don't care where you go, but you got to go. I knew God had something for me in New Jersey, so I felt restrained. I'm in New Jersey. I'm saying, God, I'm going to be homeless in a couple of days. I'm crying out to God. I'm a Christian now for about a year. I said, God, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I need a breakthrough, God. God gave me a spiritual dream. In the dream, I was sitting in front of a table with books opened up. And the table was located in the basement of a lady from church that I had met. And she was a widow woman, and she had a son. And we had struck up this friendship relationship. She was about 20 years my senior, and she loved books, and I love books. And we'd talk about, what are you reading now? We just get into these conversations about books. And so I'm sitting in this dream in our basement, but I was sitting in front of the table as if I lived there. Then the dream ended. And I knew it was a spiritual dream from God. Here was my problem. How do I call up this lady and say, God showed me that I'm supposed to live in your basement? I mean, you just can't do it. I mean, it's crazy. How do you do that? It's manipulative. It's weird. But I'm desperate. If I don't find a place to live, I'm homeless. So I wrestled with it for a couple of days. Getting closer, we're at school saying, where are you going? My stuff's packed. And I remember giving her a call. I said, Ruth, this is David Ireland. Oh, David, I was so happy you called me. Because I just had this weird experience. I didn't get a chance to talk. She said, I saw you in a dream living in my basement. Do you have a place to live? I kid you not. And I moved there for 6 months until I was able to stabilize my life. I know how Elijah felt. I know it was this sense of humiliation, but then he realizes, wait a second, it's not just me feeling as if I need to be sustained by her. There's something I have that she needs. And what he had was fear always is destroyed by faith. Faith defeats fear every time. In fact, verse 13 of 1 Kings 17, Elijah said to her, don't be afraid. Man, those are heavy words. And there's some of you here right now. You didn't know you were afraid. Once I started talking about money, he said, oh, why couldn't he talk about love? It's another week. But I get to the topic, and I want you to see how Elijah helped this widow woman engage in the spiritual principle of sowing and reaping, but she had to use faith to defeat her fear. Faith opened her eyes to God's grace and concern for her. This woman, no name the Bible gives. She was, in essence, unimportant to you and me, to her village. But yet, in God's infinite grace, He sends a national prophet who prophesies to kings and queens to go and speak to this woman that is unnamed but not unimportant to God. And I want you to know that you don't have to have a big name to get God's big attention. God knows who you are, and He knows what you have need of. And God visits you with opportunities to always demolish your fear through faith. Watch how He does that. He showed this woman that He cared enough for her. And so watch how her fear just became chipped away. The prophet says, don't be afraid. Go home and make for me first a piece of bread. First she said, I can't. Until the prophet says, for thus says the Lord, your jug of oil will not run out. Your flour will not run out until the Lord sends rain on the land. Watch how her fear became demolished. She swapped I can't to I can. She swapped being self-driven to God-driven. She was able to see that her fear was being chiseled away because she recognized God's care in sending His servant to minister to her through a challenge. One of the best things I can do for you is to challenge you in the name of the Lord. If you never get challenged, you don't know what's inside of you. And some of you, you don't have a story of what God has done for you. I would love to interview that widow woman. I'm David Ireland, the roving reporter from the Jerusalem Gazette. Tell me, what did God do for you? Bring that mic closer. Bring that mic closer. I remember I was in Kenya years ago when Obama was in office. And Obama has roots in Kenya. And I saw in front of the front pages of one of the newspapers, President Obama's grandmother in the rural area of Kenya being interviewed by CNN. She's sitting there like she's a big-time global leader. And here's a woman in a rural area of Kenya. That's what it would be if I'm interviewing this widow woman at Zarephath. Tell me what God did for you. Sonny, come here. Let me tell you. What I learned is this. Never be afraid no matter what circumstance you're in. What I learned is to trust God. What I learned is the power of sowing and reaping. What I learned is the power of seed faith. Let me tell you, at first, I was holding that in, hoarding my seed. I told the man of God boldly, I stood there toe to toe. I said, I'm not giving you any of my bread. I just have enough for me and my son. We're going to die after we eat this bread sandwich, bread in the middle, bread on top, bread on the bottom. After we eat this bread sandwich, we're going to die of starvation. But because this man of God challenged me, I saw my fear being just broken, chipped away because faith. And now that lady's saying, look, I can believe God for anything. I got a story. You want me to tell you again? I can tell you what my God's done for me. You need a story of God's provision. You need a story that points to what God's done for you. It's not good enough for you to read Bible stories. The Bible says we're living letters that people read about us. They'll read our lives, read our stories. Show me your faith, and I'll show you my works that my faith has done. Don't tell me what you can do. Show me what you've done. When you say, God raised me up, our God's a general. The general never promotes soldiers in his army unless the soldier's promotion benefits the army. The only way God's going to raise you up is you bring benefit to the army of the Lord. And when you say, God raised me up, he's saying, let me work a story in you. Let me take your circumstance. Let me turn it around. Trust me. Let me break your fear through faith. Come on, give the Lord a battle cry. We've got to learn to trust God. And so Elijah was showing this woman, don't be afraid. Oh, I want you to know there has to come a time when you face your fear and say, I may not understand what God's going to do, but I trust him. I may not understand how God's going to do it, but I trust him. I may not understand when God's going to do it, but I trust him. And fear, you can't stop me. And fear, I still trust God enough. And so you have to get to that place. There has to come a time when you trust him. Then Elijah's helping this woman. He's letting her know beliefs drives behavior. Faith defeats fear. And he lets her know planting determines reaping. I have questions of the text and of you. What would have happened if the widow did not give to Elijah first? Could she have expected a harvest? Because her giving first was her seed, was her seed faith. Could she have expected a harvest? Would she and her son have died prematurely? We're uncertain. I don't want to speculate. I'm uncertain. What we are certain of is this: planting determines reaping. Reaping follows sowing. Here's my other question. What would have happened if Elijah never challenged the widow to sow a seed? Could he have expected a harvest? Because he also ate until rain came from this woman's food. Would he have died prematurely? We're uncertain. I don't want to speculate. What we are certain of is this: planting determines reaping. Reaping follows sowing. And we must realize we can expect a harvest. I love when I get around the old timers and they tell me what God did. And you see a smile on their face and a twinkle in their eye when they rehearse what the Lord did for them, the supernatural things. That's why I love reading the Word. And there's a group of Psalms, 15 of them, from Psalm 120 to Psalm 134. They're called Songs of Ascent, A-S-C-E-N-T, songs of going up to festival, up to the temple in Jerusalem, all over the nation of Israel, whether from the north, south, east, or west, when they went up 3 times a year. Feast of Tabernacle, Feast of Passover, Feast of Pentecost, the 3 main high holy days for the nation of Israel. When they went to Jerusalem, they would sing these songs as they were going from the north, east, south, or west, going up to Jerusalem. Even if it wasn't up in terms of geographical direction, they still call them songs of ascent. And Psalm 126, you'll see, buried in the middle, there are these 2 verses. Verse 5 and 6. And they say, as they're singing it, we cried as we went out to plant our seeds. Now let us celebrate as we bring in the crops. We cried on the way to plant our seeds, but we will celebrate and shout as we bring in the crops. I must admit, these 2 verses, they've bugged me for years. What do you mean? What do you mean you're crying as you're planting, but then you're coming back with the harvest, singing? What are you telling me? Everything began to make sense about these 2 verses when I read the personal account by missionary Del Tar, who was a missionary to West Africa. Del Tar says, I was perplexed by Psalm 126 until I went to the Sahel, that vast stretch of savanna more than 4,000 miles wide just under the Sahara Desert. In the Sahel, all the rain comes in a 4-month period: May, June, July, August. After that, not a drop of rain for the next 8 months. The year's food must be grown in those 4 months. And what they grow is sorghum or milo in small fields. Del Tar says October and November. They're beautiful months, harvest months. Granaries are full, people eating twice a day. By January, not one family is eating more than one meal, and sometimes they're down to just drinking gruel. It's like a broth, like chicken broth. He says by April, you start to hear the babies crying in the twilight because they can't sleep. Their stomachs are growling because of starvation. Then, inevitably, it happens. A 6 or 7-year-old boy comes running to his father one day with sudden excitement. "Daddy, Daddy, we've got grain." "Son, you know we haven't had grain for weeks." "Yes, we have," the boy insists. "Out in the hut where we keep the goats, there's a leather sack hanging up on the wall. I reached up and put my hand down in there. Daddy, there's grain in there. Give it to Mommy so she can make flour, and tonight our tummies can sleep." The father stands motionless. "Son, we can't do that," he softly explains. "That's next year's seed grain. It's the only thing between us and starvation. We're waiting for the rains, and then we must use it." Then the rain finally comes in May. And the father does the most unthinkable thing. He takes a sack of seeds, and he knows his family's starving. And he's crying as he goes out into the field, planting his seeds, weeping as he goes along, knowing that his family doesn't have the meals. And then the seeds, when they grow into the harvest, he comes back rejoicing. That's what the psalmists were telling us. For some of you here today, the idea of planting a seed in your circumstance to the world, it's weird, it's wrong, it's unthinkable, it's downright foolish. And you, like that farmer, you go into your bag and you weep as you plant. But oh, the world doesn't understand, but our God does. You'll come back singing and rejoicing with a bag of harvest. Why? Because as farmers, you better believe in the power of the seed. Today is a special day for every one of us who is deciding to plant a seed. For some, your seed will break open a new career path. For others, your seed will break open a new financial breakthrough, maybe an educational scholarship for your kids. For others, it'll break open a new partnership in regards to your business. For others, I have no idea how God's going to break open something for you, but I believe in the harvest, and we can expect to reap when we sow. I want us now to take a moment and begin to just close your eyes and ask yourself the question, if you have not already done that during the week, what seed am I going to plant today? What seed represents for me generosity? And when you've opened your eyes, if you need to speak to your spouse about it, don't do anything independent of your spouse, and then talk with them. We'll have some harvest music being played so you can dialogue through with your spouse and arrive at something that represents you. For some in this room, a generous seed may be $10,000. For others, a generous seed may be $100. The only person that can determine what is generous is you. And the only person that can determine what is something sparingly or small is you. Whatever seed you sow must represent you. My wife and I, we sat down this week and said, here's what we're going to do. And we went back and forth and talked. And then last service, I planted that seed because I believe in the harvest. Go ahead, just give some thought. If you need to chat with your spouse, chat with your spouse. If you're single, chat with yourself. If your spouse is sitting somewhere or ushering, go and sit with them. Stand with them. I want you to be at peace in the decision that you reach. If you already know what you're going to sow, there are various ways that we can do that. On the screen, it guides us as to whether you're texting your gift. And by the way, the seed that you sow is different than your tithe. Your tithe is your ongoing financial responsibility to the work of the Lord. The seed, the Bible distinguishes that as the first fruits gift. It's a first fruits that dictates the harvest in the coming year. That's what we're doing. That's a separate gift above and beyond your tithe. Don't mix it. When you complete the offering envelope, I'm going to have us pray this litany, a prayer litany that I wrote to help us awaken our faith. So when we sow our seed today, we're sowing it with this unified prayer and unified thought. Okay. So just wave your envelope at me when you're finished. Take a moment now and just fill out your offering envelope. And then wave it at me this way. I know when you're done. I'm going to give everybody else an opportunity. This is your moment. Something special is going to take place in your life through your seed because of God's word. Don't just casually just say, oh, let me just throw a couple of bucks. That's not planting. Planting is an intentional act based on what the outcome is that you want God to do for you. Ask God to do something uniquely special and tie it to this seed so you can be able to give God praise when the harvest comes. I want us to say out loud this prayer litany together. So the media guy is going to put it up there. Okay. And I'm going to say the first word of that. It starts off. Say this out loud with me, congregation, after me. Look up on the screen. Generous God, your word says, as long as the world exists, there will be a time for planting and a time for harvest. Today, I plant a generous seed towards your work. As this seed leaves my hand, it will never leave my life. It goes into my future, and there will multiply. I expect to reap a generous harvest in my family, career, financial, and spiritual life. Use this gift to change lives. In Jesus' name, amen. And now this final assertion, it's planting time.
Thank you for joining us for Christ Church Online. This concludes this week's broadcast. Make a connection with us by subscribing to us on YouTube and social media at Christ Church USA, or check us out on our website at christchurchusa.org. Be sure to join us next week, and we'll see you soon. Bye.